So I'm so excited to delve into the Scream franchise, which I have seen many, many times. And I have not seen these movies since 2015 because whenever Wes Craven passed in 2015, I of course had to rewatch them because I wanted to pay respects for him. Which again, it's so sad that we lost him at too young of an age. But the Scream franchise to me, I've always enjoyed, but it's not one I typically rewatch a lot. And I really rewatching the first one. I don't know why I don't rewatch them because the first one rewatching it is incredible. Like I rewatching this one, I thought I feel bad because I feel like I got into a cynical state because there are a lot of people that think this movie and the franchise, because the franchise always is very meta and tries to reference other horror movies all the time, that I would have not liked it as much. Like, I feel like I'm thinking for everybody else. Like, because this is too meta, everybody was saying, oh, this isn't as good because it's very just referential or self-referential. And rewatching this, I hate that I get in that mindset sometimes where I see what the masses are thinking, or where a lot of people are thinking, and I kind of agree with them, but I don't now. Because I do really love this first one. Oh my god, like, rewatching it, I can't believe how fantastic of a horror movie this is. In some ways, I think this is Wes Craven's best horror movie that I've seen. It's hard to say if I like it more than A Nightmare on Elm Street or not, because A Nightmare on Elm Street is so iconic. But this one is just a great human horror movie. Like, I love the fact that the killer is human, and I love the fact that it's about these group of characters who have really... the main character really has an interesting plot to her. So I love the first movie, and rewatching it, I thought this was fantastic. And starting out, the first 12 minutes, everybody talks about the first 12 minutes. Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore kill at the beginning. Incredible. I love the fact how it starts with the phone ringing. She picks up the phone and she says hello, and he says hi, and like he gets a casual conversation, the Ghostface voice, to her, and then she's like, or he's like, oh, I guess I dialed the wrong number, and she's like, oh, okay, it happens, goodbye, and then she hangs up. He calls again, and she gets a tiny little more annoyed, and he's like, oh, I called back because I want to talk to you, and then she said, there's 900 numbers for that. Sorry, take it easy. And then she hangs up again, and then I love the fact that this does a fantastic job of building up that this guy, this killer is right outside, and she keeps getting the calls, and she gets more and more flustered and freaked out, and that it shows how great of an actress Drew Barrymore is in this scene. And I love the fact that she gets killed in the first 12 minutes. But they were originally going to have her as the main character. But Drew Barrymore apparently thought, well, I'll have it to where I get killed off. Kind of like in a Psycho type of way, where like the main character gets killed off at the beginning. Which so many horror movies have copied. But I feel like movies like Psycho and Scream like do it way better than most horror movies that do it. Like, for example, say something like Valentine, where like Katherine Heigl's in the movie for like 5 minutes and then gets killed. This one, this is an incredible opening, one of the best horror openings I've ever seen. Sometimes I even think it's one of the best movie openings ever because it sets the stage perfectly, and it's the scariest part of the movie. And everybody says that, but I love how it builds up to where she's on the phone, he keeps harassing her, and then he slowly digs into her and tells her like the truth, like, your boyfriend, he wouldn't happen to be Steve, would it? And then she just... like she's like, how do you know his name? And then like lines before that where like he calls a lot of times, and then she picks up the phone and says, listen, asshole. And then it's scary because the voice is great, the Ghostface voice, because he just says, don't you hang up, you little bitch, or I'll gut you like a fish. Do you understand? Like, it's legitimately scary just how this voice is and how this killer is in the movie. And I love one of the first lines on the phone where this shows that this is a human killer, because not like a Freddy Krueger, it's a human killer, where she answers the phone a couple times and then she says, why do you want to know my name? And then he says, because I want to know who I'm looking at. And then she looks around and she's like, what did you say? And then he says, and stutters, he says, I want to know who I'm talking to. and I love that's such a human moment for a horror movie villain. Like I love that because it's not a Freddy Krueger, it's not a Jason Voorhees. It's just somebody that is a human character. I love that. And I love how this is it does a referential thing where like she loses her boyfriend because she says these horror questions wrong. Where it's like he says name the killer in Friday the 13th, and she's like Jason. And then he's like, that's the wrong answer because Mrs. Voorhees was the killer in the first one. And I love how her response is just like, you tricked me. And like how she says that is so genuine. Like Drew Barrymore's performance in the beginning of this movie is incredible and really moving. Like I really do think she's incredible in this. And I love whenever she eventually has to run outside and then her parents get home and she sees her parents and she can't scream. I think it's because she's so scared that she can't like be loud, and she just goes like through her voice, like that quiet. And then, of course, Ghostface gets her after her boyfriend gets killed, gutted, which is really gross, and a great kill. But then I love the fact that the parents get home, they see like the popcorn's burning on the stove. And they start freaking out, and they're like, and the mom's like, Casey, Casey, and then like, she hears her on the phone like getting murdered, and it's scary, like it's really genuinely scary. And the husband's like, go to the Mackenzies, go on. I think it's the Mackenzies. I know that's in Halloween. I think they say the Mackenzies in this, just like how in H2O they say the Beckers. But anyways. I like the fact that the mother goes outside, that blood-curdling scream she has, and then she and her husband see their daughter hung, gutted, on the tree. Like, that is one of the best openings ever. Like, that is incredible. Incredibly scary. The scariest thing in the whole movie. And I love the movie, but that is just one of the best opening scenes in any movie. And I love how after that it shows Neve Campbell's character, Sydney, for the first time. And she's in her room, and then something pops out at her, and she screams. And I love the fact that just after you saw this horrific thing happen, her boyfriend Billy comes in, and it does a fantastic job of like, this killer just killed these two people, and then somebody's at her window. And I love how it edged that perfectly between scenes. And then we get introduced to all the main characters of this movie, which I love all these main characters. I think they're all awesome. You get Sidney Prescott, who she has a father and she had a mother who is dead. She's been dead for a year, almost. It's almost a year. And I love the fact that Sidney Prescott is such a great character in this movie, a great character in the whole franchise. I love her in every one of them, even 3, which is one I'm not very fond of, but Sidney Prescott, I love the fact that this is a teenager character whose mother has been killed. Somebody's killing people in like almost a year after the anniversary of her mother's death. And she framed this guy named Cotton Weary, who Liev Schreiber plays. And she frames him because the mother seduced him, but she doesn't believe anybody else, even though people say that the mother was a slut, and she goes all around town and Sydney doesn't believe it because it's her mother. And I love the fact that this story just does a fantastic job with the writing and the acting with this character who is struggling through so much, struggling through these killings, but also struggling through her mother's anniversary of her mother's death. And I love how the ending plays perfectly into that. Like it perfectly ties it up with a little bow at the ending with the killers. But Sidney Prescott is great in this movie. I love her. And I love the scene whenever she's in the house, or whenever she's in her dad's house after her dad left, and Ghostface calls her, like he called Casey Becker at the beginning. And I love that scene. I think that's great. And I think that she's smarter. Like, just how the first scene with her and Ghostface being chased, like, I think that's great. And she really was smart in how she stopped Ghostface in the first time she escaped him. And I really, like I said, all these other characters. We also get Gail Weathers, who is this reporter, who is this, to Sydney, a horrible person, and this kind of sellout character who Courtney Cox plays fantastically. I love Courtney Cox in this as well. And I love how this is whenever she was just a couple years into Friends. Like, she wasn't giant in, like, everything. She was just in Friends, and I love that. I love seeing her starting out in this movie. I don't know if this is her first movie, but this might be one of her first big movies. Because, like I said, she was in Friends, but I don't remember she's been in other films before Friends. But Courtney Cox's Gale Weathers is great because this is a character who Sydney has a vendetta with, because Gale Weathers wrote the book about Sydney's mother, and Sydney thinks it's all bullshit. And I love that scene between Sydney and Gale, and it perfectly shows how these two characters hate each other, but in the end of the movie, they have to help each other. But I love the scene whenever Sydney goes up to Gale after she punched her the night before, and talks to Gale, and she says, "I need a word," and Gale said, "Not a chance." And then Sydney says, "You owe me," and Gale says, "I owe you shit." And then Sydney just says, "You owe my mother." And then Gale is quiet about it, and she listens, and Gale says, "Your mother's murder was the hottest thing last year. Like, there was gonna be a book be made. Like, there was obviously gonna have a book be made about her." And I love how Sydney just says, "Yeah, but it had to be you with all your bullshit lies and theories." And this scene is one of the best acted scenes in the movie. I love this scene because then Gale just says, "What is your problem? Cotton Weary's in jail. They're gonna gas him." The book's not gonna change any of that. And then I love the fact that Gale goes into this story where Sydney is in denial about her mother, and this goes back to Cotton Weary, where Gale says that Cotton Weary was at your mother's house the night she was murdered. And Sydney said, "Yeah, he left with his coat that was all bloody." And then Gale said, "No, somebody left with his coat. He was drunk that night." And I love the fact that brings good suspicion to the story about Cotton Weary, if he was the one, because you don't see him except for one scene in this movie. He's in the other movies, but in this one, he's only in one scene, in that scene where it shows him being escorted a year ago. And I love that scene in terms of acting, and both their performances are great, bouncing off of each other. And just it draws suspicion to how Sydney's in denial about her mother being a slut, and how just Gale, it humanizes Gale, because she wrote this book about her mother, which Sydney doesn't believe her stories, but you see Gale's point of view. Like, she thinks that Cotton Weary wasn't the murderer, and Sydney she blamed him and thought it was him, but Gale believes it isn't. So I like how it shows more suspicion, and I love the performances in that scene, and just how the writing is, and how they do a great job of, like, giving off just Sydney in her denial about her mother, and just Gale thinking this is the truth, and I love that. That was a great scene with Gale and Sydney, and Gale is great in this movie as well. And then we got Dewey, who's really good too, and he's more like just the big brother of Tatum in this movie. Like, he's important, but he's not as important as the sequels. He's still good though. David Arquette's still awesome, but there's not as much to talk about Dewey in this one. He just kind of forms the romantic relationship with Gale, which is fine in this movie, but I like it more in the second one. And then we also get Randy, Stu, and Billy. Now, Randy, I really enjoyed Jamie Kennedy's performance in this. Jamie Kennedy is awesome. He's the the comedic character in this one out of the group, where he knows all the movie stuff. He knows everything about movies, about horror movies, and he works at a video store. And I like that he immediately just believes that the killers are Billy and Stu. Like, you can tell, like, he just, in the video store scene alone. And Randy, Jamie Kennedy is awesome in this. And Billy and Stu. Now, I like the one thing that does annoy me in this movie, and just watching Cody Leach's review on this, I realized that I kept repressing this thought too. Like, yeah, they have so many scenes where Billy and Stu are so obviously the killer, and rewatching his review, I remembered, and I always forget that. I'm like, wait, they do point out obviously that they could be the killers because they're so creepy. Billy and Stu are, and the other sequels don't do that. In this one, it just is so obvious that they're the killers, but they are awesome. Like, Billy is great, and I love Billy. Whenever I get to the ending, I'll talk more about his what happens. But Skeet Ulrich is awesome as Billy. Like, he's really creepy, really scary, and I love him in this one. And Matthew Lillard does a fantastic job of being Matthew Lillard. Just like Jamie Kennedy, they can both do a great job of being funny, but not ruin the tone. Like, they really do make this movie humorous, but it doesn't make the movie, like, silly. It makes these characters just characters. Like, they're really got incredible personalities, both Randy and Stu. Like, I really think they're both awesome. So we set our main characters up, and again, like, we go back to where Sydney goes back to her house, takes a nap, her dad's gone already, and then that's a great scene between whenever she has the first phone call with the killer, where she says, she tries to outsmart the killer immediately, like, as opposed to Casey Becker. Like, she immediately is like, Randy, is this you? And then she says, like she thinks, oh, you're watching me? What am I doing? And she puts her finger in her nose and she's like, what am I doing? And then she says, I'm going to hang up. And then I love the line where the killer just says, you hang up on me and you'll die just like your mother. And then you see the reaction on her face. And the killer just says, do you want to die, Sydney? Your mother sure didn't. And that just, again, the voice is terrifying. And that makes it so scary, so intimidating. And that scene is great where she's being chased by Ghostface, but she escapes. And Billy comes up, and then he's considered a suspect. Which, again, makes it seem so obvious that Billy's the killer. And like I said, Sydney and her mother being killed is great. Like, that plot where, like, she also later in the movie has a scene in the bathroom where all these girls are talking about how Sydney might be the killer because of her mother dying and her mother being a slut. And it's sad and it's horrible, and it makes you feel for this character because this character is going through so much shit while these murders are happening, a year after, right whenever her mother's murder happened. So it's great how they build up this Sydney and her mother's story. Like, I love this plot. It's so good. And then there's this scene with Sydney and Billy where Billy finally gets out of jail. He just stays there, like, for one night. And there's a great scene where, like, he brings up her mother's murder. And this plays into, it's a year right whenever these murders happen from her first mother's murder, where she's talking to Billy and he brings up her mom dying, and she's like, is your brain leaking? My mother's dead. I can't believe you would bring this up. And then Billy's like, it's been a year, Sydney. Like, my mother left me. I just came to terms with it. Which makes him sound like a horrible person, even though, yeah, it's horrible that his mother left him, but I love that scene. And then she said, it's been 1 year tomorrow. It's tomorrow, 1 year tomorrow. And I love how that sets up whenever the ending happens, it's right. Whenever it's the first year again, that's just really great whenever the ending happens in the movie. And then we get the party, which is the third act of the movie, which is all awesome. Whenever Tatum dies, like, it's silly, but, like, I liked it, though, even though she can't get picked up by a garage. Because in Scream 4, they did it to where a girl gets kind of slammed by a garage, but, like, she doesn't get lifted up because it wouldn't have done that. But it's a fun death. And Tatum, I like how Tatum says before she dies, like, don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel. Because there are sequels, and she didn't make it to the sequel. I just thought that was a funny line. But yeah, Tatum gets killed, and the Principal Hembry gets killed too. Guy from Happy Days. But I love the fact that this movie, an hour in, it's like 2 people die, and it's so interesting. Like, I love how this is such an interesting mystery movie. The whole movie is just, the first hour is literally 2 people die at the beginning of the movie, and the rest of that is them investigating, them bringing the plot about and talking about Sydney and her mother and Sydney's relationship with all her friends. Like, I love how this is such an interesting horror movie with barely any kills. They get more as the movie goes along, but the first hour, it's like there's nothing, and I love how interesting it is despite that. Because in slasher movies, you want more kills, but I think that this does an incredible job of storytelling and character development and acting that it doesn't matter, for the first hour anyways. And I love how the party, after all the kids leave, whenever they realize that Hembry, like, is hung up on the flagpole, all the kids leave, so it's just a few now at the house. And Ghostface comes and tries to kill them. And I love how there's so many fake outs, like with Dewey hid the knife in his back so you think he's dead. And then having Kenny die, and then having Gail get in the van then Kenny his dead body flies in the front of the van, so she freaks out. She almost hits Sydney. She crashes, so you think she's dead. I love the fake outs in the third act. They're great. And I love the fact with the camera where Gail and Kenny are watching the party and you have the 30-second delay. So I love whenever Kenny dies, he's like, you see Randy about to get killed in the house with Ghostface, and then it pans back to in the van, and Sydney being chased by Ghostface goes in there with Kenny, and then they're looking and they're like, Randy, oh my god, like he's gonna get killed, and then Kenny gets out of the car and he's like, there's a 30-second delay, and then Ghostface gets him because there's a 30-second delay. But that was just a great little piece of tension. Like, I love that plot point, that 30-second delay, like then he gets him right outside. That was really cool. And it just had a great intensity of it until the ending, which the ending is awesome, where you get the reveal of the killers. It's just Randy and Sydney in the house now because Sydney has a gun. She sees Stu and Randy. She doesn't believe either of them. She doesn't know who's the killer. She doesn't care anymore. And Billy's been killed. Like, another fake out, which is awesome because he was stabbed. And then you get Sydney going into the house. And then Billy shows his true colors and he shoots Randy. Another fake out where he's not dead, but they do a great job of faking out these kills. They don't just kill them off. They do a fake out where, like I said, with Dewey getting knife in the back, he lives at the end. Gail getting crashing her van, then Randy getting shot. So it's just great fake outs. And whenever you realize who the killers are. This just makes the movie. Like, I love the fact how insane the performances are fantastic from Skeet Ulrich and Matthew Lillard. Like, they're both incredible. And I love the fact that they tell their whole story, and I love the fact that their performances are just fantastic. And I love how whenever you realize the motive thing, because the studio had a problem with the motive for Billy. They're like, do we need a motive? Do we not need a motive? And I like how Billy at first to Sydney doesn't give a motive. He says, does Hannibal Lecter, did they give a motive to why Hannibal Lecter ate people? I don't think so. And then he did give a motive. So I guess the studio was like, we got to do it one way where we can give him a motive but not give him a motive. But I love how then Billy says, that motive enough for you? And then he says that your slut mother was fucking my father. And abandoned, Billy, his mother abandoned him. So Billy and Stu framed Cotton Weary and killed Maureen, the mother. And 1 year later, they killed all these other people. And they're just insane. And I love how just these killer reveals are. They're just so scary. They're really scary. And even though Matthew Lillard is silly, he is still intimidating. They are both really scary characters. I love how frightening these people are, Billy and Stu. And I loved how Sydney escaped from them for a second while they were stabbing each other to make it look like they were going to make it out alive. They were the only survivors, and they were going to blame it on Sydney's father this time because of his grief of his mother's death a year ago. But they just had him tied up and put the Ghostface phone in his pocket. But I like that whenever they stab each other to try to make it look like they were stabbed by somebody else, Sydney escapes, and Sydney uses the Ghostface voice to taunt them in the house, and I really thought that was cool. That was a cool way of being an awesome heroine to do what they did to the people they killed, but she's going to kill them. She's going to kill them for all the horrible shit they did, and I love it. And I love Stu's death because she literally, Stu chases after her and she literally, he says, I always had a thing for you, Sid. And then she grabs the TV and says, in your dreams. And she drops the TV on Stu and he just gets shocked and dies from that. That's awesome. Great kill from Stu. Or a great Stu kill. And Billy, I like the fact that Gail comes back and he quickly subdues her, or knocks her out. And then after that, Gail wakes up, and her and Sydney and Randy, Billy is on top of Sydney with a knife, and he's about to stab her, and he said, "This is like he says something about her mother, like, God, what was the line? I'm blanking on it. But he says like, "Oh, say hello to your mother," and then he like gets the knife, is about to stab her, does the knife shot up. Then Gail just shoots him because she was knocked down. She just wakes up and shoots him, and then her and Randy and Gail, like Sydney, Randy, and Gail, are the only ones left, and they're sitting there like Randy says, "This will be the moment where the killer will pop back up and do the final scare." And then Billy does that. He goes, "Ah!" And then they just shoot him in the head. And then Sydney just goes, "Not in my movie." And I just love that ending. And I loved how it ends with Gail Weathers just talking about, like, on the TV, like she's recording, like talking about what happened that awful night. And it ends that way, but I loved how this just, like, the whole movie is fantastic with just how characters are developed and how this plot is, and I love how scary it is, and I love, even though the kills are basic, I think that the kills are great. I think that all these characters are interesting, fun, have great personalities. It's a meta movie where it's very interesting in how they reference other horror movies, but it doesn't bother me as much as I thought it did. It really doesn't. I just think I'm thinking of what the masses think, and I hate that. I don't want to do that because I haven't seen this in a couple years. So that's why I probably just went that way. So, but I love this movie. I love rewatching this. This is awesome, and I really can't wait to watch the second one and review it because the second one I think I remember loving more than the first one. So we'll see what I think. Maybe I'll think I'll love them both the same way. But this is just an incredible horror movie. Rewatching it, I really love everything about it. The characters, the plot, the kills, the horror. Like, it's scary, it's funny, it's everything. It's just really one of the most perfect like meta horror movies. I really love this one. So if you guys watched all this, thank you for watching. Next up will be Scream 2.